So to start with this, you're going to need a 5/16 inch socket. Go ahead and remove your radiator hose clamp, and then just take a good look at it. And if it is separating like mine is starting to here, go ahead and replace the upper hose. One of those things that, you know, if at all possible, use what you got, but change your coolant at the same time, that way you're good to go. You definitely need to change your coolant often. This has got grit and stuff in it, so I'm definitely going to add a coolant filter. Now at this point, you can see where this is kind of swelled out with age and stuff like that, so definitely going to be a replacement item soon. And then from there, once you've got that hose clamp removed, come over to the side of your fan shroud here. You got two 5/16 inch bolts, one on each side mirroring each other. You can see the other one right there. For the fan removal, you're going to need the power built or some equivalent kit 34, whatever that is. I guess it's just the labeling. It costs about $70 to rent it, aka buy it. You buy it, and then if you take it back, you have rented it. Otherwise, you bought it for 70 bucks, but you only need 2 parts out of this. The kit came from Advance. Alright, now to do the fan clutch, if your shroud's intact, it'll tell you left-hand thread on the fan clutch. It's meaning instead of righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, it is righty-loosey, lefty-tighty. So what we're going to do is put our wrenches in this configuration. The big crow's foot goes around the water pump bolts, like you can see there. You slide it around. The nut itself is actually an 1 7/8", and this is the tool for it. So like I said, go back into the configuration you had, and instead of pulling to the left, pull to the right so that it loosens the fan clutch. You may actually have to use propane to heat up any Loctite that's been used. So there's that. Just be careful with flames around the oil and fuel. But other than that, it should come off fairly easily. Alright, so once you get it to a certain point that it's broken loose, you can see the new threads right there. And basically, gently, just use the viscosity of the fan clutch fluid to gently turn the fan clutch off the nut. Now just be careful, because if it flips forward, it's going to hit your nice pretty radiator. I have in the past used a piece of cardboard to slide it down right here in between the fan shroud and the fan itself, so that whenever you take it off, if it does bump forward, it doesn't hit the actual fins of your radiator. So once we've got to this point, now we're ready to start pulling the water pump off. First, we have to pull some bracketry off and a couple of the accessories, namely the alternator and the air conditioner compressor. And you have to go down and remove a couple bolts down here for this second bracket that goes over to the power steering pump over here. And to keep up with our bolts, because a lot of these are size and length independent, make you a template. All you need for this is a piece of cardboard, such as what I've got here, which is an old Pepsi case. You're going to need a knife, preferably a razor knife so you can make the little slits. And you're going to need a permanent marker. And all I did was just cut X's in the back so that it'll grip the bolts so I don't lose them. And from there, you have to go ahead and start removing your brackets, putting the bolts in the associated slots on your cardboard, and you should be good to go. First 2 bolts we're going to remove is the AC bolt, compressor bolts. I was going to take all these off, and I was like, no, I'll just see if I can take these 2 right here off and then rotate it out of the way. That way I can remove the 2 belts that seem to be in good tension and not have to disturb them and retighten them and do that whole technique there. Those two bolts, by the way, are 13 millimeter. So just a heads up. So I went ahead and started removing on this side one 13 millimeter bolt. This bolt here is 9/16 inch. Just in case you guys get stuck like I did and I didn't take the 4 bolts out of the water pump pulley before removing the belts that would have held tension. They're 9/16 inch bolts. And yeah, I'm a retard, so I went ahead and took everything off, but then I realized I got to take this off to get to these bolts back here that are nicely tucked behind it. So go ahead and take your nice little handy dandy fan clutch bar and just wedge it in there, leaving one of the 4 corners exposed, and just crack the tension on them, so that from there you can just take a hand and twist them out, or even just hold it with your hand like this and use a ratchet to remove them. Also, just wanted to make a note that whenever you pull this off the truck, it just slides off. There's a spacer there. So I just removed the bolts, everything at one time, and put it all together so I know how it goes back on the truck. So I got my water pump out, and I just wanted to go over what I've seen in here. Like, you can see that this little piece right here fell in after the fact, but basically this is the inside of your water pump. This is the cooling system's heart. If this has gunk in it like this, you can see right here, this was in here, it's just rust and stuff. It'll slow the pump down to the point where it plugs off right here, or it can plug off up in here. And you don't want that, because the hotter the engine runs, the less efficient it runs. Engines are kind of funny. They have a thermal range that they run into. If it's colder than X amount or hotter than X amount, they begin to run very inefficiently, because the sensors pick that up. And if it's in like a power stroke or a gasser with a computer, the computer recognizes, hey, it's running too hot, or hey, it's not hot enough. And it just throws everything into a whole different ballpark of running. This one actually seems pretty clean, so I'm curious to know if this isn't a replacement pump. Because for one, I haven't seen Motorcraft and Ford stamped everywhere, so that kind of tells me that. For whatever reason, there is silicone inside of my water pump. Now, why in the hell is there? So this has to be removed. Basically, I'm going to strip this down, clean it, paint it, and when it goes in, it'll look like new. But just from what I can't rock this or anything like that, so it seems to be good. This is why the coolant filters are a great idea. They're extra expense, but it saves your water pumps, and on these IDIs, it also helps to fight against the cavitation by catching all this crap, in conjunction with the coolant that has the additives for the anti-cavitation stuff. Like I said, just a heads up. I'm just going to clean it up, paint it, and run it. But yeah, so far I do not see one Motorcraft logo anywhere. So that means that this, I don't think, or even International. I don't see International either. I don't see either one. So I'm thinking this may be a remanufactured pump, or maybe even just a new pump, but different brand. So a little mineral spirits wire brush does a lot of wonders. It's not the finished form, because this will be cleaned and painted better than what it was. I finally found some markings, but I never found any numbers, so I'm assuming this is just casting numbers for a remanufactured or rebuilt part. I found these. So, like I said, I don't know what these mean. I just found this stuff. Documentation, pretty much. It's a lot cleaner, a lot less grit. It means it's not heat soaking as bad. So there's that. So we're going to flip it over. Now this is a point where I just wanted to go over how to clean that surface there, because if you nick it and scratch it, it doesn't want to seal up right. Alright, so again, this will be cleaned and pressure washed out, and it'll have all the little cavities cleaned. But to get this old gasket material off, like this right here, you're going to need a razor blade. That's all you need. And just work it along a little at a time. It is a tedious process, but it will come off in big pieces. Not a hard thing to do, just like, again, tedious, because you're sitting there making sure that that surface is prepped for a new gasket. This is definitely a lot easier with two hands holding it together, whatever. But just like this. If you don't hear that little grainy, gritty sound, then you're not down to the metal. But yeah, just keep going around till all your gasket surfaces are clean. Just like this. See a big piece there come off? Oh, that's rather nice. But yeah, just go back over it, make sure around all your bolt holes is cleaned. Bottle brushes, what I call them, I'm not sure what you call them. That's what I've always called them, was bottle brushes. They look like what you clean baby bottles out with, but metal. Bore brushes, I guess you'd call them, because that's the thing that it looks most like, is the bore brush for a gun. But yeah, just keep going over these surfaces, like right there. Now they actually have a scraper you can buy for like $5 or $1, depending on the kind you get. But just a regular razor blade's all you need at the minimum. And you can clean that all up, and you need to do the same for the other side. That way that whenever you do put new sealant and gaskets and stuff on, that it has a good clean place to adhere to. There's nothing in between the two mating surfaces, stuff like that. So we are to the point of removing the crank pulley off the truck, so we can remove the front plate, so we can retime this engine. So at this point, I went and rented the Power-Built 45-piece kit, and it's the model number 648616. It's about $130 to rent it, and it has multiple different little pieces in here for the job at hand. You know, in case one thing doesn't work, you can use another. The standard setup you usually see is the crow's foot style, where you can either run in a triangular fashion of bolts, or just straight across in a 2-bolt fashion, or this style here. Now, for whatever reason, it appears that I have 2 pieces missing out of this kit. Brought it home today, opened it up. We got one of these bolts missing, and then we got the jaw nut, whatever that is, missing. So this is why I don't buy rented tools, because you usually don't get all the parts. But at the very least, we should be able to get most of the parts, what we need here to do the job. So to get started with the crank pulley removal, you're going to need a 14mm socket. It doesn't have to be a deep well. I just so happen to grab one because of the extra length, extension, and your ratchet, because you have to come down on the front of your engine and remove those 4 bolts, and then you need a 15/16 inch socket deep well to reach the bolt in the center of the crank. At this point, you've already removed your 4 14mm bolts, and now the front half of your crank pulley is going to come off. It's going to have this washer, and then you're going to have to clean it. I guarantee you're going to have to clean it, because this is just 2 seconds of me with a wire brush. And you can see the other side of these grooves gets caked with oil and mud and dirt and sand and whatnot. This engine still has some of the original industrial gray color paint. But yeah, you're going to have to need this washer, because you got 4 14mm bolts holds this to the back half. And at this point, we will need to use our pulley puller. And the way it will work out is there's a 15/16 inch nut right here. inside there, you're going to have to remove that, and then use the puller to remove the actual dampener here off of the crank. Now, again, you're going to have this back washer too, so you're going to have two washers and a front pulley to deal with. So you're going to have the front one that's painted, then your front half of your pulley, then you're going to have your back half of the washer slip on the opposite side, and then it will all mate to right here on this dampener. I would highly recommend you make your timing mark where it's at so you can kind of line it back up. I did some work with it, so I've got it marked there. But yeah, at this point now I'm ready to pull the actual dampener itself off. Just a heads up, at this point, before we start, you want to put some cardboard here so you don't bash in your pretty, in my case, new radiator, because those things are about 400 bucks a pop, if not more. So yeah, go ahead and stuff you some cardboard in between the fan shroud and the radiator. And then at this point, all right, so the front half of the pulley is off. Now we're down to the harmonic dampener. Takes a 15/16 inch socket and a lot of oomph, because now we're going to be actually taking the nut that's inside there off. So this is your 15/16 inch bolt that comes out of the end of the crank. So at this point, we are now ready to install the pulley removal tool. Get this bad boy out of here so I can get this thing timed. Just a heads up, once you've pulled the 15/16 inch bolt out of the end of your crank, you will have this washer to deal with. It is about a 1/4 inch thick or so. Fits in snugly, and as you can see, this was the front part, and it will accumulate a lot of crap. So just run your finger in there, you'll feel this, and then just pull, keep moving. If it acts like it doesn't want to come out, it's because there's a lot of grease and grime on it. But it has to be removed for you to use the puller. Just a heads up, whenever you put this puller together, this is the configuration you're going to be looking for. And you're going to have a little acorn looking piece right there on the end that fits into the crank snout. And the bolts I had to use extra longer bolts to fit everything because the ones in the kit didn't work. But they were 3/8 by 3/8 inch bolts, but they were 16 thread pitch. And basically you just find you 2 holes out of the 4 for the crank pulley to set on across from each other, just in the configuration I've got right here. And then you put your 2 bolts in there and everything just like this, and you just keep pulling until it pops off. And this is what it looks like once you've got your washer off, the big washer that everybody seems to forget. And then once you get that off and you use the puller, this is what the end of the crank snout looks like. That's why you need that little tapered piece so you don't bugger up the threads. Now we can remove the 2 remaining bolts that holds the front plate on. And one's right here at the corner at each end on the bottom. And then we'll be able to pull all this front plate off. At this point, the only thing remaining is a couple bolts, one on each corner down here, that holds the front plate on. And from here, we can just pop this off and actually retime the engine the way that we're supposed to. Alright, so now we've got the 2 bolts up on the front plate removed. You can see right there and right up here is just another side of this little corner right here. That's where it's at, but you got 2 more bolts down here on the oil pan. One here and one right there that comes in from the bottom vertically. Once we got this done, we found out the silicone was actually holding it. So I think it's been pulled apart before because we found clear silicone. So here's the moment of truth, and just keep working it back and forth. And there we go, front plate is off. So now it can be degreased, it can be done the way everything else was, and I was correct, but we had to do this to verify that you got your crank to cam gear with dots together, just like on a gasser truck. But then you come up and you have this little Y-shaped deal right here that's in between two teeth.
Is it at the top?
It's in between two teeth. And there's actually a tooth for an injection pump goes in this groove right here. And that's when you know it's exactly in time. So that's that much off my mind right now. Alright, now you'll have to remove your crank seal right here. They're about $2. One of those comes with the kit, so do it while it's out. They're super simple, and they work by, this is the outside view. You come over, you put them up to it, and then you gently tap them into place. They should be flush, flat. This piece should be flush with that. And all I did was I took me a concrete block, cinder block, and fixed it so that that little timing piece was out of the way. And I just put it over there so that, like that, and then just took a hammer and screwdriver, should be a chisel, but whatever, it worked, and gently tapped it out. That's all I did. Okay, so now we're to the point where we've tipped that edge. We're ready to start putting the truck back in together and in time. This is the new seal that's been pressed in. I'll need to put some oil around it and stuff so that whenever I put it on the truck it doesn't rip or tear. I've cleaned all the gasket materials as I could. What the shirt's there for is to help keep stuff from falling in. So now everything has been painted, cleaned, or otherwise touched in some degree. So let's get this thing back together. Okay, you're going to need a 13mm socket and remove these two bolts out of your inspection cover. So now the sweet spot. This is the part in the video where everybody's going to skip to, and that's cool, because I wish to God I'd had this information a month ago. This is how to time your injection pump to your cam gear if the whole injection pump, adapter housing, and gear was removed as one piece. Now that was originally my plan, was to not do that, but if you have an issue come up where you have to remove it, that the housing is bad or something like that, I don't know, just some reason that you've ripped the injection pump off, you got to take your front plate off, which we've already covered in the video how to get to that point. You're going to try to get your engine set to top dead center, which it should be. If you've set up your harmonic dampener to the timing mark on it, to the timing mark on your front cover. Now, on 6.9 IDIs, you should have 2 dots on your crank gear. One at the 12 o'clock and one at 6 o'clock. Well, on the 7.3s, or at least the later 7.3s from 88 and up, I've seen this misconception construed there, and they only have one. And that one is right here. Now, I will show you here because I do have my radiator in place. My engine does not have 2 dots on the crank. So, we line the crank dot to the dot on the camshaft, just like that. Let me get this to focus. Right there we go, dot to dot, just like you would on a gas engine. Then you come up and you've got these two dots. They're Y's. Now if you notice on these, the Y on the injection pump is one tooth of the gear, and the Y on the cam is 2 teeth on the gear. And you want to make them made up just like I have right there. The 1 tooth of the injection pump splits between the 2 teeth of the cam gear. Now once you get in there, from there, you've got this all torn up and you've got it apart and all this, and you're ready to put your front plate back on and all that good stuff. Don't. So you can verify without any uncertainty. You don't have to try to do the mirror trick, however the heck you'd have to do that. I talked to one guy today. He said the only way that he's ever gotten the mirror trick to work is if you got one of the borescope setups that you can like plug in your phone and use it so you actually can see video feed from down in there. That's the only way you can do it. If you've got one of those, congratulations, you're good to go. Now, another timing trick. Given that all these are lined up vertically, as we've just done, you should have an alignment dial right here. Now this dial, if everything is timed straight up like I've got it, just static timing is done, this should be in the 4 o'clock position, which it is. Now what I did do was make me a mark that went up into the pump gear, comes up, and I can visibly see it from up here. You can see, if you're looking at it right there, you can see that it lines up not only to these two marks here, and this mark. They all three have alignment to the gear. So if this ever happens again, for whatever reason, I should just have to made up the 3 timing alignment marks that I made personally, and it should be good to go. Given that the cam doesn't break, the crank doesn't break, that it is, from whatever reason, that the injection pump has been removed as one solid piece, that's what we're looking at. So now once you do this and you hook all your injector lines back in and you've got your top cap on and all that good stuff, it's all hunky-dory, you should be able to prime your pump, and then from there go ahead and start your engine off. Alright, we're going to prep for the front plate install, meaning we have our gaskets laid out with some new RTV sealant. Now with these, they do have a little bit of like a rubberized sealant to them. I guess you could just install them as is, but me being me, I prefer having a little black silicone on stuff, so I'm going to put them on and let them tack up and dry before I really install that front plate. I've still got the injector pump dry fitted in there. If they go on one way, you can't really mistake it, so just as reference, the orange lines goes towards the front of the engine, because this is the back side of the front plate. Noting how the seal for the crank here goes. Don't forget, when you do put this on, you need to put some kind of oil or grease on that just to lube it up so it doesn't tear. So there's a big thing there. So you got, in your timing cover kit, you got 2 gaskets for the front plate. You've got your water pump gasket. It goes on the front side of it, and then you mount your water pump with it. And it actually comes with a fuel pump gasket, but we're not going to be using that today because we didn't take the pump out. So at this point, we'll have to put some RTV down through here to tack this on, so whenever we put bolts and stuff in, it draws it tight. And on the oil pump, on the oil pan, that groove right there that goes around, we need to make a 1/4 inch seal that goes here all the way around this, down, over and around that, and that way that seals it off. plan to not be driving the truck for about 24 hours to let it really seal up and do its thing. So I've already got my sealant cut, and all I got to do now is put my gaskets on and start installing parts.